Right. You're well. Still. So, nice and comfortable as you sit, and then just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Side. Part of your chest. Belly. And finally, last but not least, your legs. Sit back. Reclining position into the chair, allowing your weight to drop. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Just place your hands on your belly for a few moments, just to remind you that this is where you want to really feel the breathing start. And that's useful because you want to be able to let your attention go into the center of your body like this. Just a gentle, quite smooth rhythm flow in the movement of the breath. And you should have a sort of calming, soothing quality, particularly as you become more familiar with this, because you're coming back to something that you're familiar with, and that always helps. Gradually feel that the breath fills up the whole of your body as you breathe in. And bring your feet in. Maybe try the same thing again a couple of times. You might need to sit back in your chair to support your back. It's a little bit more difficult to get upright. And very specifically, looking at the breath here, away from the exercises, because I think what we want to do with the breathing is we practice the breathing every now and then. We think about it, we draw our attention to it, and then essentially we forget about it while we're doing the exercises. But gradually, the two elements converge quite naturally. And I think there's a lot of that in Tai Chi. We practice certain things, rooting down, transferring the weight, being aware of the connections in the body, being aware of the center, I mean, all sorts of things. We practice them separately, and they're like the ingredients of Tai Chi. So it's the actual performance of the exercises is a bit like cooking. So if you're going to cook a meal, you prepare the ingredients, then you put them in the pot or whatever you're cooking them in, then essentially you just leave it, and eventually the different elements of the meal blend with each other within the process of cooking. You don't have to make it happen, you just have to create the environment for it to happen. And it's much the same with Tai Chi. So your breath is one of the ingredients. You have to keep breathing, but you don't have to keep to a method or a pattern of breathing whilst you're doing all the exercises. Now just turning your head very gently. So somebody was just gently massaging your neck. And this quality of movement, as I've said before, although I don't emphasize it, it's an outcome of that process of different elements blending, and a very important outcome. Hands in front of you, that same sort of soothing quality, as I described it, as we felt with the breathing, has a direct effect on our nervous system, anxious states, stress states, and so on. Going forward, trying not to let your thoughts drift away. Hands out to your sides. And then rolling forward, winding forwards. The focusing of your attention is another element that will help to produce a quieter, calmer feeling. Your thoughts are scattered and going all over the place. That's quite a stressful quality. So the quite deep concentration that we build in Tai Chi has the opposite effect. And then, so you're winding up silk thread, you feel this very much coming from the whole of your arm. If you so what I can see some of you doing is this: your hands are coming up like this, so you're doing it from your elbows. If you look at what I'm doing here, my hands are staying in the same sort of position. My elbows are moving out and in, which means that I'm using the whole of my arm here. Go back the other way. So to build that focusing in our attention, we want to be as precise as possible with all the movements. And what you'll recognize is, for a few moments you're focused on a particular movement. Oh yeah, they've got the arm moving. And then you'll be thinking, well, I wonder if this happens in this movement. And then, well, last week we did this, and then, yeah, but last week this had happened, and suddenly you're off on a train of thought that is actually quite unhelpful. Now, tilting forwards and pushing back. So the focusing of your attention is another thing that needs to be practiced, prepared as a separate ingredient. That's where the sitting meditative processes, of course, become very important in Tai Chi. Just feeling your weight moving. Excuse me. Going into your feet and then coming back, feeling your legs filling up as your weight goes forwards, emptying as they come back. Turn a little. And then in the other direction. and then around. And back the other way. Back to the center. Raise your heel. Remembering to just take the moment to push gently into the floor each time you plant the foot. And then on the other side. And so again, just rest for a moment. Come back to that sort of quiet, calm state by bringing your attention deliberately back to this area, the middle Dan chin. Feeling your weight sinking down. And then hands out to your sides again, easing forwards and back. Chest opening, closing. The back doing the opposite, so closing as you go back, opening as you go forwards. But the opening of the chest and the front of your body may encourage an in-breath here. So with regards to breathing patterns, every now and then, just try a breathing pattern. Generally, when there's some kind of expansion, either in the whole of the upper part of our body or specifically in the front of the upper part of the body, that's when there'll tend to be an in-breath. And then fisherman cast the net. And then coming over and again, feel what's happening in the front of the body, the expansion, not so much sideways as it was with the previous two exercises, but sort of pushing up from your hips. So there's a wave coming up underneath your arms. That you're just allowing your arms to be lifted by. Ultimately, that wave should start in your feet. To emphasize that, as your arms come up, imagine somebody just pressing on your shoulders. There's always a temptation when our hands come up to lift our shoulders. You imagine that bit of pressure there that helps to keep the shoulders down. and just observe then how the movement's being produced. So now when we come to pigeon spreads its wings, it's a big expansion in both directions through the upper body. Pushing the wave. Here, for all that we have a movement that from the outside looks a lot more compact and economical than the previous one, pigeon spreads its wings, you still get that big expansion, opening and closing in the upper body, maybe with the breathing, in breath here, out breath as you go forwards. That really creates a very powerful feeling movement. All that sort of energy in a more compact space is going to increase the strength of the push. And then the hand is twisted. Same thing here. Your elbows don't come out here though, so it's very, very subtle. It's that rotation of the arm that opens the chest. And again, very economical, a very direct movement with the punch. I'm sure you haven't sort of started to strain in your hips or your back. And then it's time going back to pigeon spreads its wing, doing a sequence of 3. The pigeon spreads its wings, gives us the feeling that we're looking for, and then 2 sort of expressions of that feeling, slightly different in pushing a wave and punch with both hands. One more round. And change. And with your weight going forwards into your feet, a bit of compression in the legs. Push to stop from here down below in front of your hips. And you go forwards and it curves up. You're not lifting your hands. Okay, and then change into the vertical movements. Rooting down. Think about why this is referred to as rooting down. What is it in this exercise that really emphasizes the downward movement? When in fact what we see is mostly an upward movement. And let your hands come too high. They should stop just below your shoulders. One more round. Wild goose. Again. There's still that element of rooting down. It's a downward pressure through your hips, your buttocks, and your feet. And ideally, you will feel that just a split second before you feel the expansion up and outwards through your upper body. Again, your hands don't really come significantly above shoulder height. They get to here. What happens is this. See how my elbows drop? One more time. And then parting the clouds. The same expansion in the body, but we move forward a little bit. We come back. We settle into the hips. That pressure downwards, and then the pressure upwards. And this time, our hands can come a little bit above shoulder height. One more time. Hands dropping down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Remember, downward pressure through hip, buttock, foot, creating the push up, the expansion upwards through your body. So take your time to let your attention switch to the opposite side, the hip and the foot and so on. These are all things that aid that deep focusing of your attention. And so they're all things that, apart from being really important in their own right, if you're trying to develop these movements, paying attention like this will also help to cultivate that really deep sense of stillness and calmness. One more on each side. And then changing. Remember, anytime your hands come up, you can imagine that pressure very gently on your shoulders. Expanding, contracting. So possibly you want to try again. Breathe in and then out as your hands come back. And you try that for a couple of rounds. This time we'll add the turning in. One more round. And put out. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Feel your hips dropping back. Very, very soft feeling in your back, your neck, your shoulders. So not straining there, wrenching yourself up. Just letting the work be done through your pelvis and your hips. Imagine you're just leaning down somewhere and you're just pulling up, like pulling a friend up a slope or over a wall or something like that. Let your weight drop back. One more time. So we come over, let your hands come down, come forward slightly. Now fist your hands. So actually, when we come back here, the hands are in the same position that we start with when we do this. They're here. We go forward in the same way, but we'll just get that little bit of a push up that gives us grasp in the tiger's ears. So if you practiced getting your hands to come up without straining in your shoulders, then that will just integrate with this movement. But if you're still straining in your arms and your shoulders to lift your arms in those earlier exercises, this will be a very difficult movement for you. Chest opens and closes, and there's that same wave-like movement coming up underneath your arms. And then on the other side. So going back to the cooking analogy, we can use different proportions, different aspects of the same ingredients in different movements. And then changing. And this time bring your foot back. Wild goose again. Turning a little. Still your hands don't come above shoulder height, but now they do go all the way down. We'll expanding and contracting. Try not to turn too far. The further you turn, the more likely you are to stiffen and to strain. And if you're doing the standing, the more likely you would be to fall over, quite frankly. And then you're going to move your weight. So when you turn to your left, you're going to move into your right foot. And then in the other direction. And then this time, as you go into your right leg, just raising the left. Think of this as one movement. And turn too far. Shouldn't need to turn very far, because by the time that movement reaches your arms, it will just quite naturally increase. So if you're turning from your center, it's really quite a small movement there, building through your body. Again, like that wave rising up through your body. And like, again, previous exercises, think about that rooting down element. Hips, buttocks, feet, and with a pressure downwards that you feel before you try and move your arms. Bring your feet parallel. Fold your hands across your chest, the archer. And you can turn your head a little bit. Again, although it doesn't look as though we're really going to be using our legs, that same downward rooting movement is sort of the prelude to the arm movement. It's almost as though, we're going to do this, I'm going to stand up and do that. I'm not suggesting you do that, but you should feel as though there's a little bit of that going on. Your hands drop down, circling around. Again, that movement from the center of your body, rooting down as you go into the hip, rooting down as you go into the leg, rooting down as you go into the leg on the other side, rooting down in the final hip. And then stirring the beams and coming around, turning one way and then the other. As we extend out in any of the movements, it's a greater chance that we'll lose that sense of the root. So again, the focusing of our attention is really important here as a kind of anchor for the movements. And it's an anchor for both the physical movements, you extend out and the anchor draws you back. And for that focusing of your attention, your thoughts tend to drift out, but they're brought back by that focusing on your roots, your center. One more time. And then rubbing your hands together again. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And shoulder, your arm. The other side. Part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Standing. So, feet parallel. More to the middle. Now, rocking your weight forwards and backwards. Ultimately, the thing that's going to stop you doing this is that focus of your attention and your body following the focus of attention on your route. You want to start to feel that you're automatically brought back. And then going around in a circle. And in the other direction. Change in the feet, your legs, your hips, a little bit of compression, shall we call it, a denser feeling in the part of your body, lower body, where your weight is, be it the leg or front or back of the foot or whatever. And then what we want to do is to make that slowly smaller and smaller until we find the point where everything's kind of evenly distributed, shall we say. And then sinking down and pushing up. Again, don't let your hands come above shoulder height. Change to the wild goose. And then part in the clouds. Good. 1 foot forwards. Transfer your weight. So now when we're on the front foot, we clearly have that connection downwards through the front foot. But we should still feel some of that connection in the back foot. You've only got 60% of your weight forwards, so still 40% through the back. And again, you think of it like an anchor. It's almost pulling you back. Same when you go back, the front leg is still connected. Then as you begin to raise your toes and your heel, you get more of a connection, obviously, through the supporting leg and less through the empty leg. Until eventually, it shouldn't be too much of a problem bringing your foot in. On the other side, transferring your weight. And then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. And then depending on where you've got room, either forwards or backwards, take a couple of steps if you're comfortable with this. And then back the other way. Okay. Left foot forwards. Fisherman castanet. Remember the different ingredients that you want to be aware of. The basic rooting down, full of gravity through your hips and yield into that. The transfer from one foot to another without losing the connection in the empty foot. The opening and closing in your chest and your upper back. Sense of moving through water. Now sink back, and turn. You can have your front foot slightly open. Wind blows the willows. Start that same process of your heels and your toes coming up slightly. Don't turn too far. Remember, the further you turn, so if I get to here, I'm fine. I can stay here for a while. But watch what happens when I get to there, I'm off. And even if I don't fall over then, I'm still beginning to tense up. So I'm still starting to lose the root. And then stepping in. So it may sound strange, I'm asking you to move less rather than more. That's just the nature of Tai Chi, I'm afraid. Good. Okay. Another foot forwards and fisherman cast there. So there's a lot to be focusing your attention on. A lot that you have the opportunity to focus your attention on. Turning, wind blows the willows. Remember, don't let your arms go too high. That shouldn't be a problem, by the way, because hopefully you're feeling not that you're having to move your arms, but rather that your arms are being moved by the energy coming from the rest of the body. In those circumstances, hopefully your arms will simply stop moving at the limits of that energy. And then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping. Just put your toes down to steady yourself if you wish. Or raise the whole foot up. And then again, if you're comfortable with this, take a few steps either forwards or backwards. As you turn, just swing the foot through, plant it down, push into the ground a little bit, remember. Dragonfly skims the water. Now this time, bring your foot forwards or backwards, but then let it swing back to its original position. So you change direction. And bring your feet down. Good. Go back to your chairs. So just sitting, and this time, before we do embrace tiger, return to mountain, just again thinking about your breathing. At the start, I got you to think about this rise and fall in your belly. You got to keep that going. But now what I want you to concentrate on is just the feeling of the in-breath, where it first enters your body through your nose. So you might want to close your eyes and just take a couple of breaths, concentrating on that real sharpness as the air goes into your nose. And as your attention sort of drifts away, just ease it back. Think of it it's like trying to train a puppy to sit to heel. You just encourage it back. Don't get frustrated at this. And then let your hands drop down. And if you want to carry on aware of the breath, that's fine. But embrace tiger, return to the mountain. You could do this with an in-breath and an out-breath, and then an in-breath and an out-breath. As you can turn your attention to the root, and your whole body seems to just drain into your feet. One more round. And let your hands rest. Okay. Lovely. I hope that's brightened up a grey day for you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it did.
As always.